The woman kneeling on the worn park bench had no idea someone worth $40 million was watching her scatter breadcrumbs to a flock of pigeons like they were the most important creatures in the world. Derek Prescott had taken the shortcut through Riverside Park every morning for 3 years, always with his phone pressed to his ear, always reviewing financial reports or barking orders to his assistant. He ran one of the most successful commercial real estate firms on the East Coast, and every minute counted. But that Tuesday in late September, his Bluetooth earpiece died mid-conversation, and for the first time in 1,000 mornings, he actually looked around. That's when he saw her. She stood on the bench in sneakers and jeans, one hand extended toward the sky with seeds scattered across her palm. A cardinal landed there, bold as anything, and the smile that broke across her face made Derek stop walking entirely. People rushed past him on the path, annoyed at the obstruction, but he couldn't move. She laughed when more birds swooped down, surrounding her in a flurry of wings and chirping, and the sound carried across the crisp autumn air like music. He had no idea why he stayed watching. Derek dated models and lawyers, women who wore designer clothes and understood the demands of his schedule. This woman wore a faded green jacket and had her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked completely ordinary, completely beautiful. When the seeds ran out, she hopped down from the bench and pulled a small notebook from her jacket pocket, scribbling something down while glancing up at the trees. Derek realized he'd been standing there for 10 minutes. He forced himself to keep walking, but he looked back 3 times before the path curved and she disappeared from view. The next morning, he left his apartment 15 minutes earlier than usual. He told himself it was to get a head start on the day. He told himself the Bluetooth incident had reminded him to appreciate his surroundings. He told himself a lot of things, but the truth was simpler and more ridiculous than he wanted to admit. She was there again. Same bench, same jacket, but this time she had what looked like a bag of birdseed and was methodically filling small paper cups, arranging them along the back of the bench. Sparrows and finches hopped around her feet, entirely unafraid. She spoke to them softly, words Derek couldn't make out from the path, but her tone was gentle and warm. He slowed his pace, pretending to check his phone while watching from the corner of his eye. A jogger nearly crashed into him and Derek apologized, moving to an empty bench about 30 feet away. He sat down, genuinely looking at his email now but hyper-aware of every movement in his peripheral vision. This was insane. He was a busy man. He had a meeting with investors at 9 and 3 properties to review by noon. He didn't have time to sit in a park watching a stranger feed birds. He stayed for 20 minutes. When she finally gathered her things and started down a different path, Derek stood abruptly, brushed off his suit pants and headed to his office. His assistant Melissa gave him an odd look when he arrived. "You're late," she said, checking her watch. "That's not like you." "Traffic," Derek muttered, which was a lie. He was never late. He prided himself on punctuality. The third morning, he brought coffee. He sat on the same bench with his laptop open, half working and half watching. She arrived at 7:30, exactly like before, and Derek realized she had a routine as strict as his own. She set up her cups of seed, made some notes in her small notebook, and waited. The birds came in waves, different species at different times, and she seemed to know exactly what to expect. A squirrel approached cautiously, and she tossed it a peanut from a separate bag. "There you go, Franklin," she said clearly enough for Derek to hear. "You've been waiting so patiently." She named the animals. Of course she did. Derek found himself smiling at his laptop screen, not at the quarterly reports displayed there, but at the absurdity of his own behavior. He was a 34-year-old millionaire sitting in a park pretending to work, so he could watch a woman talk to squirrels. On the fourth day, Thursday, it rained. Derek brought an umbrella and sat on his bench anyway, telling himself he just wanted some fresh air before the office. She showed up in a yellow raincoat with the hood up, still carrying her bag of supplies. She scattered the seed quickly, trying to keep it from getting too wet, and the birds that came seemed more frantic, hungrier. She stayed longer than usual, making sure everyone got their share. Derek's umbrella was large and black, expensive. He watched water drip off the edges while his dress shoes got muddy. This was getting out of hand. Friday, he decided he wouldn't go. He took his usual route, the one that bypassed the park entirely, and made it all the way to his building before turning around and walking the 12 blocks back. When he arrived, she was already there, and he felt an embarrassing surge of relief. He sat on his bench. She scattered her seeds. 45 minutes passed like nothing. The weekend felt too long. Derek attended a charity gala on Saturday night, bid on a sculpture he didn't want, and made small talk with a woman named Victoria who worked in fashion. She was attractive and intelligent and clearly interested, but when she suggested drinks at her place, Derek politely declined. He went home alone, annoyed at himself, and spent Sunday reviewing contracts while his mind kept wandering to a park bench and a cardinal eating from someone's hand. Monday morning arrived like a gift. He was there by 7:15, which was ridiculous because she never showed up before 7:30. He used the extra time to actually work, plowing through emails with unusual efficiency. When she arrived, she wasn't alone. An older man walked with her, heavyset and using a cane. They chatted animatedly, and Derek felt an unexpected spike of jealousy before logic kicked in. The man was in his 70s, probably a grandfather or family friend. The woman helped him onto the bench, and they scattered seeds together, laughing when a particularly bold blue jay landed on the man's outstretched hand. They stayed for over an hour, longer than her usual routine, and Derek's second coffee went cold while he watched them. The way she steadied the man's elbow when he stood, the careful patience she showed, told Derek more about her than a dozen conversations could have. When they finally left, Derek felt the loss like a physical thing. Tuesday started his third week of this madness. He'd been coming to the park for 12 days straight, and his assistant had started making comments about his improved mood. His business partner Richard had noticed too. "You seem different," Richard said during a meeting about a new acquisition in Boston. "Less stressed. You start meditating or something?" "Just getting more fresh air," Derek replied, which was technically true. That morning in the park, the woman dropped her notebook. It fell into the grass beside the bench, and she didn't notice, gathering her empty seed bags and walking away down the path. Derek stood immediately, crossed the distance in long strides, and picked up the notebook before he could think about what he was doing. He should call out to her. She was still visible, maybe 50 yards away. Instead, he looked down at the open page and saw neat handwriting documenting bird species, times, behaviors. Sketches filled the margins, surprisingly good drawings of cardinals and robins and mourning doves. "Excuse me," he called finally, jogging after her. She turned, and Derek got his first close look at her face. Green eyes, a small scar through one eyebrow, freckles across her nose. She was younger than he'd thought, probably late 20s, and even more striking up close. "You dropped this," he said, holding out the notebook. Her hand flew to her jacket pocket, then her face flooded with relief. "Oh my God, thank you. I would have been devastated." She took it from him carefully, like it was made of glass. "I've been keeping this log for 8 months. Bird watching?" Derek asked, though he already knew, sort of. "I'm a graduate student. studying urban wildlife populations and their adaptation to human environments. These guys are my research subjects. She gestured to the birds still pecking around the bench behind them. Well, volunteer research subjects. They don't know they're helping me write a thesis. Derek laughed. I've seen you out here before. You're very dedicated. Every morning like clockwork, she said with a grin. Rain or shine, I'm sure I look ridiculous to normal people with normal jobs. Not ridiculous, Derek said. Passionate. She studied him for a moment, and Derek became acutely aware that he was wearing a suit that cost $3,000, and she was wearing sneakers held together with duct tape. I'm Gwen, she offered. Gwen Gardner. Derek Prescott. They shook hands and her grip was firm and warm. A commuter nearly ran into them and they both stepped to the side of the path. You work around here? Gwen asked. About 6 blocks north, commercial real estate. Ah, so you're one of those people who's always on their phone looking stressed. Derek winced. Guilty. Though I've been trying to slow down lately. Notice my surroundings more. It's a good park for that, Gwen said. She glanced at her watch, an old digital thing with a cracked face. I should get going. Class at 9. But thank you again for returning this. You saved me from a complete breakdown. Anytime, Derek said. She gave him one more smile and headed down the path. Derek watched her go, then returned to his own bench, sat down and let out a long breath. He'd spoken to her. After 12 days of watching from a distance like some kind of creep, he'd actually had a conversation. It felt like progress and simultaneously not nearly enough. Wednesday morning, he brought 2 coffees. It was presumptuous and probably weird, but he did it anyway, getting a simple medium roast with cream because she seemed like someone who appreciated straightforward things. When she arrived at 7:30, he walked over to her bench instead of watching from his own. Good morning, he said. I wasn't sure how you take your coffee, so I guessed. If I'm wrong, no hard feelings. Gwen looked surprised but pleased. You brought me coffee. Call it thanks for the entertainment. Watching you work with the birds is more interesting than most of my meetings. She laughed and accepted the cup, taking a sip. Perfect, actually. You're good at guessing. She gestured to the bench. Want to sit? I promise the birds don't judge. Derek sat, feeling victorious and trying not to show it. Up close, he could see her notebook was held together with rubber bands and the edges were worn soft. Her jacket had a small patch sewn onto one elbow, neat stitching that looked homemade. So how does this work? He asked. The research. Gwen's whole face lit up. Okay, so urban environments are usually considered hostile to wildlife, right? But certain species are incredibly adaptive. I'm tracking which species thrive, which struggle, and what factors contribute to their success. Food availability, nesting locations, human interference levels, all of it. She talked for 20 minutes straight, hands moving expressively, pointing out different birds and explaining their behaviors. Derek forgot about his phone entirely, forgot about his morning meeting, forgot about everything except the way her voice rose with excitement when a rare species appeared. Sorry, she said finally, laughing a little. I get carried away. My roommate says I need an off switch when it comes to this stuff. Don't apologize. It's refreshing to hear someone talk about their work like they actually love it. You don't love real estate, Derek considered the question. I'm good at it. I like the challenge, the negotiation, the problem solving, but love, I don't know if I'd go that far. That's kind of sad, Gwen said, but not in a judgmental way, just honest. Maybe, Derek admitted. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching a family of sparrows squabble over seeds. Derek's phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. He ignored it. I should let you get to work, Gwen said, standing and brushing crumbs from her jeans. But this was nice. Thanks for the coffee. Same time tomorrow. Derek asked before he could stop himself. She smiled. "I'll be here. The birds have me on a strict schedule." Thursday and Friday passed in a blur of morning conversations. Derek learned that Gwen shared a cramped apartment with two other graduate students, that she'd grown up in Vermont, that she could identify bird calls within seconds of hearing them. She learned that Derek had built his company from the ground up starting at age 26, that he lived alone in a penthouse he barely spent time in, that he'd never owned a pet because he traveled too much. "That's depressing," Gwen said when he mentioned the pet thing. "Everyone needs something alive to come home to." "I have plants," Derek offered. "Do you, though? Or do you pay someone to have plants for you?" Derek grimaced. "My housekeeper waters them." "Doesn't count." The following Monday marked a month since Derek had first seen her. He couldn't believe it had only been 4 weeks. In that time, his morning routine had completely transformed. He woke up looking forward to the park, to the conversations, to the way Gwen's nose crinkled when she laughed at his stories about difficult clients. That morning, he arrived to find her bench empty. 7:30 came and went. 7:45. By 8 o'clock, Derek was genuinely worried, which was absurd. She didn't owe him anything. She probably had a morning class or overslept or 1,000 other normal reasons for missing one day. He went to work distracted, snapping at his assistant over nothing and staring out his office window instead of reviewing contracts. Richard stopped by around 11. "What's going on with you?" his business partner asked, settling into the chair across from Derek's desk. "You've checked your phone about 40 times in the last hour." "Nothing, just distracted." "This wouldn't have anything to do with why you've been coming in late every morning for the past 3 weeks, would it?" Derek looked up sharply. "I haven't been late." "Fine, later than usual." "By like 45 minutes, which for you is basically late." Richard leaned back, studying him. "So what is it? New gym, therapy, secret breakfast club? I've been taking morning walks for stress." "Uh-huh. And does this stress relief have a name?" Derek wanted to deny it, but Richard had known him for 8 years. They'd started the company together when nobody thought two guys barely out of business school could make it work. He was the closest thing Derek had to a best friend. "Gwen," he admitted. "Her name is Gwen." Richard grinned. "Finally. I was starting to think you were a robot. What's she like?" "She's a graduate student, studies birds in the park. She's brilliant and passionate and completely unimpressed by anything I do for a living." "Sounds perfect for you." "I barely know her," Derek protested. "We've just talked a few times. And you're checking your phone every 3 minutes hoping she texted you." "She doesn't have my number." "Then get her number, you idiot." Derek ran a hand through his hair. "It's complicated." "It's always complicated. That's not an excuse." Richard stood, heading for the door. "Life's short, man. If she makes you smile like you've been smiling lately, don't overthink it." Tuesday morning, Gwen was back. Derek felt relief wash over him so intensely it was embarrassing. "Hey," she called when she saw him. "Sorry I missed yesterday. My professor scheduled an emergency meeting about my thesis proposal." "No need to apologize," Derek said, walking over. "How did it go?" "Good, I think. She had some concerns about my sample size, but overall she's supportive." Gwen started setting up her seed cups. "I realized yesterday that I don't have your number. What if I need to cancel or something?" Derek tried not to look too eager as he pulled out his phone. "Good point. What's yours?" They exchanged numbers, and Derek immediately saved her contact with a small bird emoji next to her name. Gwen caught sight of it and laughed. Very cute. Seemed appropriate. October arrived with cooler temperatures and changing leaves. Derek started bringing breakfast for both of them, pastries from a bakery near his apartment. Gwen protested the first time, saying he didn't need to spend money on her, but he pointed out that he was going to eat anyway and company was nice. After that, she accepted with good grace, always offering to split the cost, which he always refused. Their morning meetings stretched longer. 45 minutes became an hour, then 90 minutes. Derek started scheduling his first meetings for 10 instead of 9, claiming he was doing morning property visits. It wasn't entirely a lie. He was visiting a property. It just happened to be a public park, and the only thing he was evaluating was how the morning light caught in Gwen's hair. One Thursday in mid-October, Gwen's phone rang while they were talking. She glanced at it, frowned, and declined the call. "Everything okay?" Derek asked. "Just my landlord." "Third time this week," she sighed. "He's raising our rent, again, 20% this time. That's illegal in this city without proper notice and justification. Tell him that. We've got notice, technically, 60 days, and his justification is that market rates went up." She shrugged, but Derek could see the stress in her eyes. "We're looking at other places, but everything in a reasonable commute is so expensive. Graduate student stipends aren't exactly generous." Derek's mind immediately went to solutions. He owned property all over the city. He could offer her a place at a reduced rate or no rate at all. But even as he thought it, he knew how it would look. Rich guy trying to buy his way into her life. Offering housing to a woman he was interested in. All the power dynamics were wrong. "I hope you find something good," he said instead. "Thanks. We will. We always figure it out." That night, Derek lay awake in his penthouse, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Gwen in some cramped apartment, worried about rent, while he had 4 empty bedrooms and a mortgage payment he barely noticed. The inequality of it bothered him more than it ever had before. He'd grown up middle class, comfortable but not wealthy. His parents were both teachers. The money, the success, that was all his own doing. Built through 16-hour days and smart risks and refusing to quit when the first 3 years nearly bankrupted him. He'd earned everything he had. But lately, when he was with Gwen, his wealth felt less like an achievement and more like a barrier. She didn't know the extent of it. He'd been vague about his work, letting her assume he was just another real estate agent showing apartments. If she knew the truth, knew he owned the firm, knew about the 40 million in assets, would it change things? Would she look at him differently? The following Monday, Derek arrived at the park to find Gwen already there, but she wasn't alone. A man stood close to her, talking animatedly, and even from a distance, Derek could read the tension in her posture. He walked over without thinking. "Everything okay?" The man turned, and Derek immediately disliked him. Mid-30s, expensive casual clothes, arrogant expression. "Who's this?" The man asked Gwen. "A friend. Derek, this is Marcus, my ex-boyfriend." Ah, that explained the tension. "We were just talking," Marcus said, but his hand was on Gwen's arm, "about getting back together." "We were not," Gwen corrected, pulling her arm away. "You were talking." "I was telling you I'm not interested." "Come on, Gwen, we were good together, you're just being stubborn." Derek stepped closer, putting himself slightly between them. "She said no, pretty clear." Marcus looked him up and down. "And you are someone who understands what no means." "Derek," Gwen said quietly, "it's fine. Marcus was just leaving." Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Derek's stance made him reconsider. "Call me when you change your mind," he told Gwen, then walked away. Gwen let out a breath. "Sorry about that." "He's been showing up randomly for the past 2 weeks. Has he been bothering you?" Derek asked, still watching Marcus's retreating form. "Nothing I can't handle. He's mostly harmless, just persistent and annoying." She managed a weak smile. "Thanks for the backup, though." "You went full protective mode there." "If he shows up again when I'm not here, call me," Derek said. "I mean it." "My night in a business suit," Gwen teased, but her hand touched his arm briefly in genuine gratitude. They settled onto the bench, but the mood was different. Derek couldn't stop thinking about Marcus, about the casual entitlement in his voice, the assumption that he could convince Gwen to do something she'd already refused. "How long were you together?" Derek asked. "About a year. Ended 6 months ago when I caught him cheating." Gwen scattered seeds mechanically. "He keeps saying it was a mistake, that he's changed, but I'm not an idiot. Once that trust is broken, it's gone." "Good," Derek said. "You deserve better than that." "Yeah, well, not exactly drowning in options at the moment." She glanced at him, and something in her expression shifted. "Can I ask you something? Why do you keep coming here? I mean, not that I don't enjoy our talks, but you're clearly a busy person. This has to be cutting into your work schedule." Derek considered his answer carefully. "Because this is the best hour of my day. Every day. Work can wait." Gwen looked down at her hands. Oh, I wasn't sure if you were just being nice. You know, friendly to the weird bird lady, but that sounded like maybe it's more than that." Derek's heart pounded. "Would it be okay if it was more than that?" She met his eyes, and he saw nervousness there mixed with hope. "Yeah, it would be very okay. Then it's definitely more than that." Gwen smiled, and Derek felt like he'd won something far more valuable than any business deal. "So what now?" "Now I ask if you'd like to have dinner with me. Somewhere that isn't a park bench. Though the park bench is great," he added quickly. "But maybe a restaurant. This Friday." "I'd love that." They made plans before Derek had to leave for work finally, 90 minutes late and not caring at all. In the elevator up to his office, he couldn't stop grinning. His assistant did a double take when she saw his face. "Did you win the lottery or something?" Melissa asked. "Something like that." Derek spent the week distracted and energized at the same time. He closed a major deal on Wednesday that he'd been negotiating for months. He hired 3 new analysts. He approved plans for expanding into the Philadelphia market. And through all of it, he thought about Friday night, about taking Gwen to dinner, about where this could go. He chose a restaurant carefully. Not too fancy, nothing that would make her uncomfortable. A small Italian place in her neighborhood with excellent food and a relaxed atmosphere. He made a reservation for 7. Friday took forever to arrive. Derek went to the park as usual that morning, and Gwen was practically bouncing with excitement about something. "I got a grant," she announced before he even sat down. "A research grant from the university. It's only $5,000, but it means they're taking my work seriously. And I can buy better equipment, expand my study area, maybe even present at a conference next spring." Derek hugged her without thinking, lifting her slightly off the ground. She laughed in surprise, and when he set her down, they stood close together for a long moment. "That's incredible," Derek said. "You deserve it. I feel like things are finally coming together, you know. The grant, my thesis, moving forward, this thing with you." She gestured between them. "It's been a good month." "Best month I've had in years," Derek agreed. That evening, Derek changed clothes 3 times before settling on dark jeans and a button-down shirt. Casual but put together. He showed up at Gwen's apartment building right at 7, texted that he was outside, and tried not to pace on the sidewalk. When she emerged, Derek momentarily forgot how to speak. She wore a simple blue dress and had her hair down for the first time since he'd met her. She'd done something subtle with makeup that made her green eyes even more striking. "Wow," he managed. "You look beautiful." "You clean up pretty nice yourself," Gwen said, looking pleased. "No suit this time. I do own other clothes." "I was starting to wonder." Dinner was perfect. They talked for 3 hours, working through appetizers and entrees and dessert, until the restaurant staff was clearly waiting for them to leave. Gwen told him about her family in Vermont, her parents who ran a small farm, her 2 younger brothers who thought her bird research was hilarious. Derek talked about his childhood, his parents who were proud but didn't quite understand his drive to build something bigger. "You ever slow down?" Gwen asked over tiramisu. "Like, actually take time off?" "Not really. I take calls on vacation. Check email constantly. Richard jokes that I'm going to work myself into an early grave." "That's sad, Derek. What's the point of all the success if you never enjoy it?" "I enjoy it," he protested, but it sounded weak even to his own ears. When? When do you just exist without thinking about the next deal or the next meeting? Derek thought about it. "The park, with you, that's when." Gwen reached across the table and took his hand. "Then maybe you need more of that in your life." "Are you offering?" "I might be." They walked back to her apartment slowly, taking the long route through the park even though it was dark. The paths were lit with old-fashioned lamps, and the autumn air had turned crisp. Derek took off his jacket and draped it over Gwen's shoulders when she shivered. At her building's entrance they stopped. Derek knew he should kiss her. Every signal said she wanted him to, but he was suddenly nervous in a way he hadn't been since high school. "I had a great time," Gwen said. "Best first date I've ever been on." "Really, really?" She stepped closer. "Are you going to kiss me goodnight, or do I need to do it?" Derek laughed and leaned down, and kissing her was like everything good condensed into one moment. She tasted like chocolate and wine, and her hands came up to his chest, fingers curling into his shirt. When they broke apart, both slightly breathless, Derek rested his forehead against hers. "I'll see you Monday morning," she asked. "Absolutely." Over the next month they fell into a pattern. Mornings in the park, where Derek helped her scatter seeds and record data while drinking coffee and stealing kisses between bird sightings. Dates twice a week, sometimes dinner, sometimes movies, once a comedy show that had them both crying with laughter. Derek had never been happier. But the secret of his wealth gnawed at him. Gwen still thought he was just a real estate agent, someone comfortably middle class. He'd mentioned his company in passing but never clarified that he owned it, that his name was on the building. Every time he thought about telling her, the timing felt wrong. After a great date, he didn't want to risk ruining the mood. During their peaceful mornings, it felt like bringing problems into their sanctuary. Richard confronted him about it in early November. "You still haven't told her," his partner said. "It wasn't a question. It hasn't come up naturally. Because you're avoiding it, Derek, she's going to find out eventually. Better it comes from you." "What if it changes things? What if she thinks I've been lying to her?" "Have you been lying?" "Not explicitly, just not correcting her assumptions." Richard gave him a look. "That's pretty much lying, man, and the longer you wait, the worse it gets." Derek knew he was right. That evening he resolved to tell Gwen everything. He picked her up for dinner and she immediately noticed something was off. "What's wrong?" she asked in the car. "Nothing's wrong. I just need to talk to you about something." That's a terrifying sentence. At the restaurant, Derek ordered wine he barely touched. Gwen watched him with growing concern. "You're freaking me out," she said. "Just say whatever it is." "I haven't been completely honest with you about my work." Her expression shuddered slightly. "Okay. I told you I work in commercial real estate, which is true. But I didn't mention that I own the company, Prescott and Associates. We manage about $800 million in properties. Personally, I'm worth around $40 million. Gwen stared at him. "You're a millionaire." "Yes. And you didn't think to mention that." "I didn't know how. Every time I started to, I got scared you'd see me differently." "Differently how?" "Like someone with money instead of just me." Derek reached for her hand across the table. She let him take it but didn't squeeze back. "I've dated women who only cared about the bank account, the lifestyle. With you, it was never about that. You liked me for me. I didn't want to ruin it." Gwen pulled her hand back. "So you lied." "I never lied. I just didn't correct your assumptions." "That's semantics, Derek. You let me think you were someone you're not." I am that person. The guy who meets you in the park, who talks about your research, who thinks you're incredible, that's me. The money doesn't change who I am. It changes the context of everything. Gwen's voice was tight. All those times I complained about rent, about needing to budget for equipment, about graduate student poverty, and you just sat there with $40 million and said nothing. What was I supposed to do? Offer you money? That would have been worse. You could have been honest. Her voice rose and a few other diners glanced over. She lowered it. I shared everything with you. My struggles, my fears, everything. And you held back this massive part of your life because what? You thought I was some kind of gold digger. No, that's not. I need to think about this. Gwen stood, grabbing her purse. I'm going to go. Gwen, please, let me drive you home. We can talk about this. I'll take the subway. I need space. She left before Derek could argue further. He sat alone at the table, staring at her untouched wine glass, feeling like everything good in his life had just walked out the door. The next morning he went to the park even though he was sure she wouldn't show. She didn't. Sunday was the same. Monday, Derek waited until 9 o'clock, missing 2 meetings, but the bench stayed empty. He texted her, called twice, finally sent a long message explaining everything he'd wanted to say at the restaurant, apologizing again, begging her to talk to him. She didn't respond. Work became a blur. Richard took over client meetings because Derek couldn't focus. A week passed with no word from Gwen. Derek drove past her apartment twice, almost knocking on her door both times, but stopped himself. She'd asked for space. He needed to respect that, even though it was killing him. 10 days after the disastrous dinner, Derek's phone rang at 11 at night. Unknown number. He answered anyway. Derek, Gwen's voice quiet and shaky. He sat up in bed. Gwen, are you okay? I'm fine. I'm sorry for calling so late. I've been thinking and I needed to talk to you. I'm glad you called. I've been miserable. Me too. He heard her take a breath. I was really hurt, angry. I felt like you'd been playing some kind of game with me, pretending to be a regular person while secretly being rich. I never meant it like that. I know. I've had time to process, and I know. You were scared and you handled it badly, but I get why. There was a pause. My roommate pointed out that I wasn't exactly forthcoming about Marcus still bothering me. I downplayed it because I didn't want you to worry or think I couldn't handle it. That's different. Is it? We both held back things we thought might complicate what we had. Mine was smaller, sure, but the impulse was the same. She sighed. I'm not saying what you did was okay, but I understand it, and I miss you too much to let this end like this. Derek felt hope bloom in his chest. I miss you so much. The park isn't the same without you. Nothing is. Can we meet tomorrow, talk properly, anywhere, anytime? The park, 7:30, where this whole thing started. Derek barely slept. He was at the park by 7, pacing near their bench like an anxious teenager. When Gwen appeared at exactly 7:30, he had to physically stop himself from running to her. She looked tired, like she hadn't been sleeping well either. But she smiled when she saw him, and that was enough. Hi, she said. Hi. They sat on the bench, not touching, watching early morning joggers pass by. I did some research, Gwen said. Looked up your company. You weren't kidding about the 800 million. There are articles about you, profiles in business magazines. One called you the most eligible bachelor in the city. Derek winced. Those are always exaggerated. They mentioned your penthouse, 4,000 square feet with a view of the river. Gwen, I'm not mad, just processing. Your life is so different from mine. We're from completely different worlds. We don't have to be. Money doesn't have to matter. But it does matter, Derek, not in a bad way, but it's part of who you are, what you've built. I was wrong to make you feel like you had to hide it. She turned to face him. And you were wrong to hide it. If we're going to do this, we need to be completely honest with each other about everything. I can do that. I want to do that. Your turn, then. Full honesty. What do you want from this, from us? Derek took a breath. I want everything. I want mornings in this park and dinners at your favorite restaurants and meeting your family in Vermont. I want to support your research and hear about your day and fall asleep next to you. I want a future with you, Gwen. I'm in love with you. Gwen's eyes filled with tears. That's really honest. Too much? No, perfect amount. She wiped her eyes. I love you too. I have for weeks. It terrified me because it felt too fast, but I couldn't help it. Derek pulled her close and she came willingly, burying her face in his chest. He held her like she might disappear if he let go. I'm sorry I wasn't honest from the start, he said into her hair. I'm sorry I ran instead of talking it through. We'll be better, both of us. They stayed like that until the birds started gathering, looking for their morning meal. Gwen laughed and pulled away, digging in her bag for seeds. Can't neglect my research subjects, she said. They depend on me. Derek helped her scatter the food and slowly their routine returned, but it was different now, deeper. There were no more secrets between them, nothing held back. When Gwen mentioned her ongoing rent problems, Derek offered to help her look for a new place, using his industry connections to find something in her price range. She accepted gratefully. Thanksgiving approached, and Gwen invited Derek to Vermont to meet her family. He'd never been nervous about meeting parents before, but this mattered. He bought a nice bottle of wine and drove them north on Wednesday afternoon. The Gardner farm was small and charming, with a main house and a barn and fields that stretched toward tree-covered hills. Gwen's parents, Helen and Tom, were warm and welcoming. Her brothers, Greg and Grant, were in their early 20s and immediately started teasing Gwen about her fancy boyfriend. He's not fancy, Gwen protested. He just dresses nice. That watch costs more than my car, Greg observed. Derek looked down at his wrist, suddenly self-conscious. He tried to dress down, but some things were harder to hide. Greg, stop, Helen said. Derek, ignore them. They have no manners. Dinner was loud and chaotic and completely different from the formal, quiet meals Derek was used to. The Gardners talked over each other, told embarrassing stories about Gwen's childhood, and welcomed Derek into their family like he'd been there for years. He helped Tom with dishes while the others played cards in the living room, and the older man gave him an appraising look. She's special, our Gwen, Tom said. Always has been. Even when she was little, she'd sit outside for hours watching animals, learning their habits. We knew she'd do something important. Her research is brilliant, Derek agreed. She's going to make real contributions to the field. I'm not talking about her research. I'm talking about her heart. She cares deeply about everything. People, animals, causes. If you're in her life, you're in her heart completely. That's a gift and a responsibility. Derek met his eyes. I know, I don't take it lightly. Tom nodded. Good. Then we'll get along fine. That night, Derek and Gwen took a walk through the fields under a sky full of stars you could never see in the city. Gwen pointed out constellations while Derek held her hand and thought about how much his life had changed in 2 months. Your family is wonderful, he said. They like you. My mom told me you're a keeper. Good to know I passed the test. There was never really a test. I just wanted you to see where I come from, the farm, the simplicity of it. This is what feels like home to me. Derek looked around at the dark fields, the old barn, the little farmhouse with warm light spilling from its windows. It was about as far from his penthouse as you could get. But with Gwen's hand in his, it felt more like home than anywhere he'd been in years. December arrived with early snow. Derek's company holiday party was scheduled for mid-month at one of the city's best hotels. He asked Gwen to come as his date, and she looked nervous. That's going to be all your business associates and their partners, right? People from your world. People who work too hard and take themselves too seriously, Derek corrected. You'll be the most interesting person there. I don't have anything to wear to something like that. So we'll go shopping. My treat. Gwen gave him a look. I don't want you buying me expensive clothes. Consider it armor. This party is going to be boring and looking good while your board helps. She laughed. Fine, but nothing ridiculous. The dress she chose was elegant and simple, dark green that matched her eyes. Derek wore his best suit, and when they arrived at the party together, heads turned. His employees and business partners were clearly curious about the woman on his arm. Richard approached immediately. You must be Gwen. I've heard so much about you. The business partner, Gwen said, shaking his hand. Derek talks about you all the time. Hopefully good things. Want to help me embarrass him. I have stories from our early days that he'd prefer stayed buried. Absolutely not, Derek said, but he was smiling. The party was exactly as boring as promised, but Gwen handled it perfectly. She made conversation with clients, asked intelligent questions about projects and developments, and charmed everyone she spoke to. Derek caught her checking her phone once and saw she was looking at data from her research. Bored? He asked, a little. But I'm having fun watching you in your element. You're very good at this, the networking thing. You make people feel heard. Years of practice. Later, during a speech from the company's CFO, Gwen leaned close and whispered, when this is over, can we go get terrible fast food and eat it in the car? I'm starving and the tiny fancy appetizers here aren't cutting it. Derek loved her so much in that moment he could barely stand it. Absolutely. They left early, changed into casual clothes in Derek's car, and hit a drive-through for burgers and fries. They ate in the parking lot, talking about everything and nothing, and Derek thought about the party they just left, full of wealthy people in designer clothes, and how none of them were having as good a time as he was right now. Christmas came fast. Gwen had to go back to Vermont for the holiday, and Derek faced spending it alone. His parents were on a cruise, and Richard was visiting family in California. He was planning a quiet day of work when Gwen called him on Christmas Eve. What are you doing tomorrow? She asked. Nothing much. Catching up on paperwork. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. Get in your car and come to Vermont. My family is expecting you. I can't crash your family Christmas. You're not crashing. I'm inviting you. We have a guest room and my mom is making enough food for 20 people. Please come. I don't want you alone on Christmas. Derek felt warmth spread through his chest. Are you sure? Completely sure. Drive safely. There's snow predicted. He made the trip that evening, arriving late to the farmhouse glowing with lights. Gwen met him at the door in pajamas and a ridiculous Santa hat, and kissed him thoroughly before pulling him inside. Christmas at the Gardner farm was magical. They opened presents around a real tree that Tom had cut from their property. Helen cooked an enormous breakfast. They played games and watched old movies, and everything was warm and comfortable and perfect. Derek gave Gwen a leather-bound journal for her research notes, much nicer than the falling-apart notebook she'd been using. She gave him a bird identification guide with a note inscribed in the front, for all our mornings together, past, present, and future. On Christmas night, they sat by the fireplace after everyone else had gone to bed. Gwen was curled against Derek's side, half asleep. Thank you for coming, she murmured. This was the best Christmas I've had in years. Thank you for inviting me. Your family makes everything feel easy. They love you. Grant asked if you could get him a job at your company. Derek laughed. Tell him to send me his resume. Don't encourage him. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Derek thought about the year ending, about how different his life looked now compared to January. He'd been all work, no balance, no real happiness outside of closing deals. Now he had Gwen, had mornings that mattered more than meetings, had a future that looked full and bright. The new year started with purpose. Gwen's thesis defense was scheduled for March, and she was deep in preparation. Derek helped where he could, reading drafts and listening to her practice presentations. His company secured 2 major acquisitions in January, expanding their portfolio significantly. They were both busy, but they made time for each other. Morning meetings in the park became sacred, untouchable time. Dates happened even when they were both exhausted. In February, Marcus showed up at the park again. Derek was running late that morning due to a conference call that went long. When he arrived, he found Gwen standing and Marcus blocking her path on the sidewalk. "I've asked you to stop coming here," Gwen was saying, her voice firm, but Derek could hear the edge of anxiety. "We need to talk," Marcus insisted. "Really talk. You've been ignoring my messages." "Because I have nothing to say to you. We're done. We've been done." "You're with that guy, aren't you, the suit? I've seen you together. He's wrong for you, Gwen. Too uptight, too corporate." Derek approached quickly. "She asked you to leave, so leave." Marcus spun around. "Of course you're here. Are you following her or something? We meet here every morning. This is our spot. You're the one who keeps showing up uninvited." "Gwen, tell him to back off," Marcus said. "Actually, I'd like you to back off," Gwen replied. "Derek is right. You need to stop this." "I'm not getting back together with you. I'm in love with someone else. Move on." Marcus looked between them, and Derek saw the moment reality sank in. "Fine, whatever. You'll regret this." He stormed off, and Derek resisted the urge to follow and make sure he really left. "You okay?" he asked Gwen. "Yeah, just tired of dealing with him." She sank onto the bench. "Why can't he accept that it's over? Some people can't handle rejection. It becomes about their ego instead of actual feelings. I should probably block his number. Probably a good idea." They sat together, and gradually the morning returned to normal. Birds came for their food. Gwen made her notes. Derek drank his coffee and watched her work, feeling grateful for boring, peaceful moments. Gwen's thesis defense in March was intense. Derek sat in the back of the room while she presented to a panel of professors, fielding questions about methodology and conclusions. She was brilliant, confident, entirely in her element. When the panel dismissed her to deliberate, she joined Derek in the hallway, looking nervous. "You were perfect," he told her. "I stumbled on the question about sample diversity. You recovered beautifully. They looked impressed." 20 minutes later, the panel called her back in. Derek waited, pacing the hallway. When Gwen emerged, she was grinning. "I passed, Dr. Gardner, eventually, once I do all the final paperwork and revisions." Derek picked her up and spun her around, not caring that they were in the middle of a university building. "I'm so proud of you." They celebrated with dinner at the restaurant where they'd had their first date. Over wine, Gwen talked about her plans. She had several job interviews lined up, research positions at universities and conservation organizations. One was in the city, 2 were out of state. "What about the one here?" Derek asked, trying to sound casual. "It's a good position. Postdoctoral research with potential for a tenure track eventually. But the one in Colorado has better funding and more freedom to design my own projects." Derek's stomach dropped. "Colorado? I haven't decided anything yet. I'm just weighing options." "Of course. You should consider everything." But the thought of Gwen moving across the country made Derek feel physically ill. They'd been together for 5 months. That wasn't enough time to ask her to stay for him, to turn down a better opportunity. But the idea of losing her was unbearable. Over the next 2 weeks, Gwen went to her interviews. The Colorado one went especially well. She came back excited, talking about the research facilities and the team and the projects they wanted her to lead. Derek listened and smiled and felt like he was watching her slip away. Richard confronted him about it. "You look miserable. What's going on? Gwen might move to Colorado. There's a job opportunity." "So what are you going to do about it?" "What can I do? I can't ask her to stay for me. That's not fair to her career." "You could go with her." Derek stared at his partner. "What? Go with her? Open a branch office in Colorado or run things remotely? You've built this company into something that can survive without you hovering over every decision." "I can't just leave." "Why not?" "What's keeping you here besides habit and fear of change?" Richard leaned forward. "You're in love with her, Derek. Real, actual love. I've known you for almost a decade, and I've never seen you like this with anyone. If you let her go without even trying to make it work, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Derek knew he was right. That night he went to Gwen's apartment with takeout and a proposal. "I've been thinking," he said as they ate on her couch, "about the Colorado job." Gwen's expression became guarded. "Okay, you should take it if it's what you want. It sounds like an incredible opportunity. But I'd like to come with you. If you want, I can set up a satellite office in Denver, run a lot of things remotely." Richard's been saying for years that we should expand west anyway. Gwen put down her food. "You'd move across the country for me." "I'd move anywhere for you if you want me to. I'm not trying to pressure you or make this about me. Your career is important." "But I love you and I want to be where you are." Gwen's eyes filled with tears. "That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me." "Is that a yes?" "It's a let me think about it. The job here is good too, and all my research is set up in this city. The birds I've been tracking for a year are here. My data set is local. So stay here. Take the job here. I'm just saying that wherever you go, I want to go too." She kissed him, and Derek tasted salt from her tears. "I love you so much. Can I have a few days to decide?" "Take all the time you need." A week later, Gwen accepted the job in the city. When Derek asked why she chose it over Colorado, she said it was the better fit for her research, but he suspected he'd factored into the decision. He tried not to feel guilty about that, tried to just be grateful that they weren't facing a separation. Spring turned to summer. Gwen started her new position at the university, teaching one class and conducting research. Derek's company continued to grow. They fell into a comfortable routine, spending most nights together, either at his place or hers, though his was admittedly more spacious. In July, Gwen's lease was up. She'd been looking at new apartments with her roommates, but Derek had a different idea. "Move in with me," he said one morning in the park. Gwen looked startled. "That's a big step." "We're together almost every night anyway. You have your own drawer at my place. Half your clothes are in my closet. This just makes it official." "Your place is huge." "I'd feel weird living somewhere so expensive. It's just a space. It only matters because you'd be there." Derek took her hand. "I want to wake up with you every morning, fall asleep next to you every night, come home to you. I want all of it, Gwen." She bit her lip, thinking, "Can I redecorate?" "Because your place is very modern and minimalist, and I'd want to add some warmth." Derek laughed. "You can do whatever you want with it. Paint the walls, buy new furniture, adopt 100 birds. I'm not adopting 100 birds. But you'll move in." "Yeah, I'll move in." The transition was easier than Derek expected. Gwen didn't have much stuff, and what she did have made his sterile penthouse feel like an actual home. Plants appeared on every surface, colorful blankets draped over the couch. Books and research papers covered the coffee table. She set up a small office in one of the spare bedrooms, filling it with specimens and equipment and charts. Living together was good. Great, actually. They learned each other's routines, the rhythms of daily life. Gwen sang in the shower and was grumpy before her first coffee. Derek worked too late sometimes and needed reminders to actually stop and eat dinner, but they balanced each other. Gwen made Derek slow down, appreciate moments. Derek gave Gwen stability and support she hadn't had living with roommates. 1 year after they'd met, Derek took Gwen to the park at dawn. She thought it was just another morning routine until she saw what he'd set up. Someone, probably Richard, had arranged flowers on their bench, and bird feeders filled with premium seeds surrounded the area. "What's this?" Gwen asked, looking around in wonder. "A year ago, I walked through this park and saw you feeding birds, and my whole life changed." Derek took her hands. "I'd been sleepwalking through life, focusing on work and nothing else. Then you came along and suddenly mornings mattered. Small moments mattered. I learned what it felt like to actually love someone, not just care about them or be attracted to them, but really, deeply love them." Gwen's hands tightened on his. "Derek," he pulled out a ring box and dropped to one knee on the path. Around them, early morning joggers stopped to watch. "I want to spend every morning for the rest of my life with you, in this park or anywhere else as long as you're there. Gwen Gardner, will you marry me?" She was crying and nodding before he finished the question. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." Derek slid the ring onto her finger, a simple emerald surrounded by small diamonds, and stood to kiss her while strangers applauded. When they broke apart, birds were already gathering for their morning food, oblivious to the humans' drama. "They're happy for us," Gwen said through tears, gesturing at the birds. "They just want breakfast. Let me have this romantic moment." They fed the birds together, engaged, planning a future that felt bright and certain and full of possibility. The wedding happened in October, back at the Gardner farm in Vermont. It was small, just family and close friends, exactly what they both wanted. Derek's parents flew in from Arizona, where they'd retired, and got along wonderfully with Gwen's family. Richard served as best man and gave a speech about how Derek had been a workaholic robot until Gwen came along and made him remember he was human. They honeymooned in Costa Rica, spending 2 weeks hiking through rainforests and observing tropical birds. Gwen took 1,000 photos and made notes for potential future research. Derek barely checked his work email and didn't miss it. When they returned to their penthouse in the city, it felt different. Not just a place to sleep between work commitments, but a real home. They hosted dinners for friends. Adopted a dog, a rescue mutt named Pip who adored them both. Started talking about the future in concrete terms. 2 years into their marriage, Gwen got pregnant. They'd been trying for 6 months, and when the test came back positive, they both cried in their bathroom at 6 in the morning. Derek went to the park with her that day as usual, and they sat on their bench watching birds and talking about how their lives were about to change again. Their daughter was born in May, a healthy baby girl they named Charlotte Helen, after Derek's grandmother and Gwen's mother. She had Derek's dark hair and Gwen's green eyes, and from the moment the nurses put her in Derek's arms, he was absolutely lost to love. Fatherhood transformed him in ways he hadn't expected. He cut back his hours at work, delegated more, learned to leave the office at reasonable times. Richard took on more leadership responsibility, and the company thrived under their shared management. Derek discovered that success didn't have to mean sacrifice, that balance was possible if you prioritized correctly. When Charlotte was 6 months old, they brought her to the park for the first time. Gwen scattered seeds while Derek held the baby, pointing out different birds and making up silly stories about them. Charlotte watched everything with wide, curious eyes. "Think she'll be a scientist like her mom?" Derek asked. "Or a ruthless business mogul like her dad?" Gwen countered. "I'm not ruthless. You're a little ruthless. In the best way." They sat on their bench, the same one where Derek had first watched Gwen from a distance, where he'd worked up the courage to talk to her, where he'd proposed. Charlotte gurgled happily, reaching for a sparrow that landed nearby. "Hard to believe it's been 3 years," Derek said. "Best 3 years of my life," Gwen replied, leaning against his shoulder. "Mine too." Around them, the park bustled with morning activity. Joggers and dog walkers, other parents with strollers, business people rushing to work. Everyone in their own world, their own story. But for Derek, this was the only story that mattered. This bench, this woman, this child, this life they'd built from a chance encounter and scattered birdseed. He'd been a millionaire before Gwen, successful by every traditional measure. But he'd been empty, going through motions, achieving things that didn't fulfill him. Now he was rich in ways that had nothing to do with money. He had love and purpose, and small perfect moments that added up to a whole beautiful life. Charlotte grabbed his finger with her tiny hand, and Gwen laughed at something one of the birds did, and Derek felt a peace so complete it was almost overwhelming. This was everything. This was enough. This was more than he'd ever dreamed of wanting. Years would pass. Charlotte would grow, and eventually there would be a son named Thomas Derek. They'd move to a house with a yard when the city apartment got too crowded, something with space for kids and dogs and Gwen's research equipment. Derek's company would expand to 12 cities, and he'd become even wealthier, though it would never matter as much as it once had. Gwen would publish papers that changed her field, become a professor, mentor dozens of graduate students who reminded Derek of her younger self. But the mornings in the park would remain constant. Even when the kids got older and stayed home with a babysitter, Derek and Gwen would come back to this place, this bench, these birds that had witnessed the beginning of their story. They'd drink coffee and watch the wildlife and talk about everything and nothing, the way they had from the start, because some habits were worth keeping. Some routines became traditions, and some chance encounters in a park early on an autumn morning changed everything forever. Derek pulled Gwen closer, kissed the top of Charlotte's head, and watched a cardinal land on the bench back right where it always had. The bird cocked its head, looking at them with bright, knowing eyes, then flew away into the morning light. Perfect, Derek thought. Absolutely perfect.